Welcome to Not Suitable for Democracy. I'm your host, Nick, and today we're talking about not so much the left, but the right. So we have a lot of breaking news that's been going on over the past few days, and I'd like to share what's happening with conservatives. So we're going to be talking about the new Pentagon document that has a lot of news outlets refusing to sign, the propagandist video featuring Kristi Noem calling out the shutdown and blaming Democrats at the airport, and, of course, this is all going on against the backdrop of the horrible, terrifying, disgusting ICE raids. And then lastly, speaking of horrible and disgusting, the young Republican leaders whose group chat was exposed with the most vile, disgusting language and communication that young people, millennials and Gen Z who are conservative, are using in their day-to-day language. It's pretty terrifying that this is actually going on in our country, but here we are. So if you'd like to stay updated on all the latest news, make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And don't forget to follow along on Instagram and TikTok. They use the same handle, so you can follow along at NSFD_pod. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is now throwing a temper tantrum. The guy who was a former Fox News host whose only qualification to be Secretary of Defense was playing with G.I. Joes as a boy, has grown up and now been a horrible leader for the United States military. And what I mean by that is that there is a new document out from the Department of Defense that is forcing media journalist, reputable, longtime journalist, to sign, basically saying that they are only allowed to report on the pre-approved documents, facts, and numbers that are administered by the Pentagon, which, as you know, comes from Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. So again, this guy was the Fox News host, which is now running our United States military. And this document is essentially saying we'll only give you access to what's going on behind the scenes based on what we give you, which sounds very much like a communist China type of thing, right? Like, it doesn't sound normal that, like, they can revoke access if you don't use your pre-approved numbers. And, like, give you an example. We already saw how the tariff policies are causing job losses for the American economy. And we keep seeing the jobs report getting changed and updated because the numbers are not good. Trump even fired the guy who was giving the original numbers, and now he has a new guy in there. So does that give me hope or any semblance of trust that the numbers we see coming out of the White House will be accurate? Absolutely not. So here we have Pete Hegseth doing the same thing, but for the military. Now, the freedom of the press is protected under the First Amendment. And fortunately, the media and the journalists are fighting back. Okay, so this is a long list, but these are the folks who refuse to sign this bogus Pentagon document. Okay, we have the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, ABC News, CBS News, NBC News. All right, that's like 6. Then we also have conservative outlets such as Fox News, Newsmax, the television network, right? So that's 8. And then we also have the Associated Press and Reuters. Those two, you can't get more neutral than that. They are very much nonpartisan and they are very much straight by the book. If you notice for the Associated Press, every time there's an election, we always wait until the Associated Press calls it because they have a very rigorous journalistic standard before calling an election because they do their homework. So the fact that all of these news outlets and media publications are withholding their signature because they refuse to sign that document. Now, other elements of the document also include granting access to parts of the Pentagon. And basically, if Pete Hegseth doesn't want journalists going anywhere, in the Pentagon, they're basically relegated to only the bathroom and the janitor's closet, okay? I'm being facetious here, where that's not literally what it says in the document, but that's essentially what Pete Hegseth can actually commit them to only visiting, right? Those are the only 2 places. And then I guess you could also argue the entry and the exit, haha. But at the end of the day, there's really no faith in trusting this government. So I'm really pleased to see that so many reputable media publications, both on the left and the right, and smack dab in the middle, are refusing to sign because, hey, freedom of speech and freedom of the press are protected under the First Amendment, and this control of like consolidation of power that Pete Hegseth is doing under the Department of Defense from Trump and his regime. It is not good for American democracy. It is not suitable for democracy. So we have to call it out, right? And the solution here is to really hope that all these media outlets and journalists like hold the line, that they do not sign. Two is that if they get their press revoked, that they are able to get inside sources, right? People within the Pentagon who do care about liberty and do care about transparency. They will be able to, share some tidbits of what's going on. And then three, at a time when taxpayer dollars are going to fund horrible operations around the world, internationally, on behalf of the American military and our allies, it's very important that, we have a right to know what's going on. Over like $1 trillion of taxpayer money goes toward the military, and over 60% of the budget goes toward the American military. So we have a right to know exactly how they're using every penny and what they're doing behind the scenes, because this looks very shady. It does not sow any trust, but more distrust between the government and the public. So I would highly encourage everyone to support local journalism, support the folks that are refusing to bend and capitulate to Trump and his regime. Pete Hegseth, man, this guy, he just needs to step away from the Pentagon and step away as a Department of Defense. Go back home, play with your G.I. Joe toys, and call it a day. This guy has been a huge disappointment for the American military, and I really hope he doesn't cause much more damage than he already has. Next up, we have Kristi Noem and her propagandist video that is being shown in American airports. Now, what is this propagandist video? And yes, it is propaganda. The reason why I call it that is because Kristi Noem in the video, she starts off talking about your pleasant experience at American airports, which is fine and dandy. I have no problem with that. But then she goes on to say how your airport experience will be affected because she is blatantly calling it the Democratic shutdown, or I think Democrat shutdown is the language she uses, and then saying that they refuse to fund the resolution bill that would fund the government. So it's one thing to have like partisan views and like, sure, she can call it a Democrat shutdown because that's how she feels, but to do it in a video that is then, administered to airports around the country so that the general public sees that and views that is propaganda. That is literally propaganda when the government is using this messaging that is not true, that obviously is slanted a certain type of way, and is supposed to psychologically make the public feel a very specific feeling. And that feeling is distrust toward Democrats. And there's no reason to do it when you're at the airport, you see the video, and you're like, oh, okay, and then, oh, why are they talking about Democrat shutdown? Like, that's essentially what they want the average American, or even traveler who's not, like, checked into American politics to be thinking. So this propagandist video is, they're trying to force it across every major and smaller airport in the country. For instance, it's currently being shown in airports in Michigan, right, which we know is a swing state. So you can see how the Trump regime is very cleverly using propaganda and optics to really get the American people on their side. Because remember, in the 2024 election, Trump did not win the majority of votes. He won the plurality, meaning that the number of votes he received was under 50%. It was like 49 point something, right? And then lastly, we know that right now Republicans are in hot water. If they have the House of Representatives and the Senate and the White House, there should be no reason why they can't come up with a negotiation deal to fund our government. They're in control of all three houses. So it's like, what's the problem here? It's obviously you guys. So the issue I have with this propagandist video, right, is that there's two things. One is that it violates the Hatch Act. Now, the Hatch Act from 1939, right, like almost 100 years ago, but this was also created during FDR's tenure in the White House. So the Hatch Act essentially prohibits government employees from taking part in certain political activities. Now, pretty straightforward, right? And when those political activities are based on the government employee, right? When they're doing these activities, they have to be done in a nonpartisan fashion. So clearly, you can see instantly how this violates the Hatch Act. The head of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, is now using government resources to create a video that's administered under the Department of Transportation to airports around the country. That's the first connection. And then second connection, administered in a nonpartisan way. Well, when you have her political activity saying Democrat shutdown, and then administering that around, all the airports, that is very much a clear violation of the Hatch Act, right? Her political activity is filming a video that is not partisan, is very much skewed toward Republican propaganda. And then on top of that, the general public is then seeing this on a daily basis. And all of that, what they're doing, not suitable for democracy. That's not okay. We should not be weaponizing or propagandizing, just generic, public service, right? The whole point of having, public service, is supposed to help encourage the public to, get through their day to day. Is not supposed to be tilted or slanted toward the left or the right in any propagandist way, shape, or form. So, fortunately, some airports are pushing back. So, for instance, right here on the East Coast, we have Newark International Airport, based out of Newark, New Jersey. They are refusing to show that airport video, which is great. In addition, we also have here in New York City, LaGuardia, which does mostly domestic flights, and then we have JFK, which is an international hub, right? LaGuardia, right here in Astoria, and then JFK out in Jamaica, in Queens. These two are also refusing to show that propagandist airport video. So it's great to see that there is some pushback. Now, in addition to those 3 airports refusing, there are some caveats here where if the airport falls under the jurisdiction of TSA, right? Transportation Security Authority or Administration. They are the ones who administer the airport video. And if some airports aren't under that jurisdiction, then they do have the right to refuse to show it. Even if they are under TSA, they do have the right to refuse it. But for smaller airports, right? It's been reported that the smaller airports that aren't the big ones, they sometimes just don't have the capability to show that video, right? Smaller airports probably don't have the video screens, and most of the screens at the airports are controlled by the airports themselves. So fortunately, it won't be shown in every single airport throughout the country, but that is the goal of the Trump administration. So if you are traveling anytime in the next few weeks, take a look to see if your airport is showing that video. We can see right then and there if this airport is capitulating to Trump or if they support the Republican administration, right? And again, it's a very small move having Kristi Noem film a video and put it in the airport. But this is the psychological game, right? They're blatantly telling lies, right? For saying it's the Democrats' fault when Republicans have control of the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. So it's a really weird move because, they're grasping for straws, doing anything possible to really push on the American people that it's not Republicans' fault, even though it very clearly is. Even the latest polls show who is to blame for the shutdown. Majority of Americans say it's the Republicans, right? Not the Democrats. Democrats and independents both have the majority saying that it is the Republicans' fault. So with all of that said, it's not suitable for democracy that they're doing this propagandist video in airports around the country, but good for Newark, JFK, and LaGuardia to refuse to show it and actually fight back. And I would encourage more people who work in airports, right? That they call this out and they talk with their coworkers saying hey, check this out. I don't think this is cool, because that's how we organize, right? And essentially, the more we talk about how weird it is and how just wrong it is, that's how we start to build momentum and really push back against the Trump administration and all of their petty moves. Now, there has been some breaking news over the past few days of some really serious headlines, okay? So this to give you an idea of where we're at, let's jump into it. Now, the breaking news that everyone is talking about is actually with young Republican leaders. Now, this may seem like a weird start, but think about it. We have young folks, mostly Gen Z, some millennial, but these are young men and women who are in positions of power. And what I mean by that are that these are the Republican parties within like Kansas, like Missouri, even the state of New York, right here in our own backyard. So these young leaders, why are we talking about them? Well, it was revealed in their Telegram group chats that they are communicating in a way that is so heinous, vile, gross, disgusting, deplorable, okay? This is just so bad because the way they are talking about fellow human beings, it is a blatantly gross, vile attempt to dehumanize them. Now, Politico published the report, and you can see all of the text messages online. I will not repeat some of the things that are said because they are just that heinous, disgusting, and gross. So I'll give you some examples of what's being said between Republican leaders, okay? Now they're referencing, these horrible names for, black people, using the N-word. They're making references to praising Hitler. They're even talking about unaliving, and I realize I have to say the word unalive because with social media these days, if you say KILL, the video gets flagged. So I am just being very clear that I need to say the word unalive because now our social media algorithms are designed to catch that kind of stuff. But these Republican leaders are using that word, okay? They're using these words to cause harm unto other people. That's how serious this is. Now, of course, in the exchange, right, they're referencing, it's like 2,900 pages. Okay, so this isn't like a one-off. All right, this was over the course of 7 months, right, most likely since Trump took office. And the whole point here is like whether they're talking about, winning a leadership position in a Republican group. Some of them are actually elected officials, like state senators, like actual elected officials for the public, where our taxpayer dollars are going toward these people who have such crazy, vile, heinous, disgusting views of other human beings. The point here is like they have undercover in a way. They have put their foothold into American politics. So whether we like it or not, have positions of power. And the crazy part is that they are lurking among us like everyday people. And sure, free speech gives them the right to say whatever they want and criticize the government. But when it comes to having these viewpoints about other human beings, this is a very serious charge in the fact that we have to work with them, right? Maybe in our office. We have to even, be neighbors with them, right? If you ever borrow a cup of sugar from someone, you got to go next door. These people are within our communities, they're within our government, and it's pretty scary thinking like this is how they think about other humans. Now you may say to yourself, well, it's just their internal thoughts, they're just putting it on in text message, like what's the big deal? They're in positions of power. This isn't just some random dude in his basement like upset and angry with the world. These are people who are now making policy decisions and influencing policy decisions in how we govern ourselves as a society. And it's scary to think like these are kids. These are like young millennials and Gen Z, and more likely Gen Alpha, because they are going to be seeing this, reading this, and consuming this online. So how do we stop all of this? These young Republicans, right? All of them, this is not suitable for democracy. The fact that they are now having these horrible viewpoints, dehumanizing other groups of people, right? All for the sake of their quest for domination. Republican Party is built on hierarchy and order. So now they are using dehumanizing language to create that social hierarchy, aka white supremacy. That's where it comes from. Because if you notice, all of the kids that are featured in the photos, they're white or white passing. So the fact that they want to assert themselves in a position of dominance, because they clearly have nothing else good going on in their lives, right? There's no reason to attack someone else, right? To bring others down, to build yourself up. But that's exactly what they're doing. So now we need to be very cautious about how we treat other people, what we say about other people, because they will most likely retaliate. They will most likely come for you. They will try to dox you, right? Take away your resources to live a secure, stable life. They will try to psychologically harm you, right? Harassment, cyberbullying, right? And hopefully not go after you on the street physically, because there's no stopping what they are capable of doing. And it's scary to think that we must now mingle with them. Mix and mingle, whatever you want to call it, interact with them, right? It's pretty, this is serious stuff. They're young. And I don't know if there's enough hope to get them to see through their ways, to get them to see how harmful and violent of some of the things they're saying. They were even celebrating rape and sexual assaults. Again, celebrating unaliving people. Like, bonkers that this is 2025 and we are dealing with this. But what are the solutions, right? Again, we have to be cautious and be mindful of what we say and how we approach people. And I think one good way to counter that is through empathy. Now, I'm not saying that we need to treat them like victims, but there will be times where we need to at least try to see what they're actually angry about. Where it's really weird to be angry about strangers and people we haven't met. But I will say they're probably frustrated in some degree because they feel like they're losing power. They feel like they're unworthy. They feel like they're inadequate. And how could that be? Well, if they don't have a sense of community, and put it this way, the young Republican leaders, their sense of community is within the Republican bubbles. But sense of community could also be their neighbors, their coworkers, right? Or even other social clubs that they may or may not be a part of. We also have the sense of, let's say, they might not be getting the jobs they want. They might not be able to move up in their career because of their inadequate skills. So it's also about kind of encouraging confidence and self-esteem in healthy ways, right? You don't have to tear others down to bring yourselves up. This is where mental health comes into play. And lastly, like, let's say there is something where they saw, maybe they're in their life experience, right? Someone they loved or someone they appreciate, they saw go through a hard time. Whether a loved one got sick and passed away, whether, they saw someone in their lives get evicted, right? Or even just struggle with like maybe divorced parents. Things happen. So like it sets them in a bad mindset. And when that anger and resentment takes root, it seeps deeper and deeper into your psyche, where then they start to have an open mind to these really negative thoughts, right? Negative, horrible, vile thoughts. And if they start to feel comforted in those negative thoughts, then this is what you get. You get horrible language and rhetoric, phrases that are just that should not be spoken, but they feel so comforted in that hate. And when other people feel the same way, that's their sense of community. Like, oh, you feel that way too? Great. We were connected because we share the same values. It's wild. But what we'll have to do is really just show how we can bring them back through empathy, right? How can we understand where their anger or resentment is really coming from? And how can we work with them? Now, that's the wild part, right? As much as these young Republicans really want some people in this country unalived to make them feel good, it's the wrong approach. But we still have to work with them. And let's put it this way, like folks on the left, progressives, right? I'm not saying we need to give them compassion because they literally have zero compassion for many people, and it's pretty scary that they're using their influence to create harmful policies. But what we can do, right? We will need to build those bridges at some point, especially if we ever want to pass or enact the most ambitious policy goals that would help the greater good. Medicare for all, a single-payer healthcare system, right? When loved ones are dying and go into medical debt because of our dysfunctional healthcare system, we will need to work with them to organize and hopefully get the votes at a federal, state, or local level to then pass these reforms. Climate change, we know it's impacting millions of Americans every time there's a natural disaster. People are losing their homes, they're losing their livelihoods, some even lose their lives. We will need to work with them in order to pass these reforms. Now, I know it's crazy. No one wants to work with someone who wants to unalive you. It's wild, and it is something we'll have to wrap our minds around. But if we can at least try to build that bridge where our common goal, right, far exceeds or supersedes our personal feelings, that will be the only way we can actually bring people into the fold and strengthen our democracy. We don't want people to die no matter who they are through climate change, through lack of healthcare access. And the list goes on. There's so many great policies that we can be fighting toward and building bridges for. And I know it's going to be hard. Again, personal feelings against these people, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. But I feel like once Democrats are back into positions of power at the federal level, most state levels, right? And even hopefully locally for wherever you live, I would hope that this inspires you, right, to run for office, to think about even getting involved in the political process, because this is how we'll only be able to combat that, right? We need to be taking those positions of power. People like that who have vile, disgusting beliefs, they're not going to be able to govern forever. Fortunately, I have enough hope in the American people that they will rise up and they will clearly see that we cannot be treating other humans like that. Now, the MAGA movement and the worst of the worst, that's not the majority of the country. Fortunately, we still have the numbers, right? Most people don't want to see other people discriminated against and whatnot. So, what we'll have to do, find the empathy to build those bridges. Definitely call it out if you see horrible behavior. Like, you don't have to dox them. You don't have to, necessarily cause psychological harm of your own. But you do have to call them in and say, hey, I don't really think that's appropriate. I don't think that's the right language to use. Hey, can we do better? Can we not try to communicate in such a way that's actually harmful? But then also, how can we as a community, right, try to find common ground through other issues, not political, but maybe social, hobbies, interests, bring them into the fold so then they are not using their anger and their resentment. That would eventually go the way if they start to feel positive, they start to feel encouraged, and they start to build self-esteem and confidence in a way that helps people, in a way that helps themselves. And then lastly, outside of how we have to deal with them, we have to run for office. We have to get involved in the political process, right? You can volunteer at your polling location, right? They're like polling sites are always looking for people to manage the polling stations. There are other ways where there are party office. I've had folks on this show talk about their experience in party office, right? It's not just public office that's taxpayer funded, but there are party offices, volunteer positions that are unpaid, but they do dictate policy and how the local Democratic parties within your respective states and counties are galvanizing people, organizing people, and what values they're putting forward. This is what we have the strength in numbers, and until we either take back those positions of power or come out stronger, showing that we do not accept what they're talking about and how they're governing, then we can finally put an end to, or at least not an end, but really push back on the hatred that's coming out of the right. So I really encourage y'all to really think about how we can do a better job, how we can, combat that, and how you can potentially empower your community to rise above the fray. And that's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard and want to learn more, then make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Or you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok. They both use the same handle, so make sure to follow at NSFD_pod. Thanks so much for tuning in, and catch us next week with a brand new episode. But until then, remember, democracy is not suitable without you.